gonna get started. I've just got a couple slides for everybody. Will not take long because most of today's is going to be very very interview format, so you guys can learn as much as possible about a situation that just happened. So this is kind of one of those, they're giving it to you right now before they've had a chance to process it and fold it all down into exact, here's what we would take away from it. And I think it's going to be super valuable. So today's topic in the COVIDeo series from Food Co-op Initiative is Oshkosh Raising Capital During the Storm. And today I'll be in the room to make sure everything kind of runs, but our facilitator is going to be Katie Novak from Novak Cooperative Coaching. Hey, Katie.
Hello.
And featuring today from Oshkosh Food Co-op is Brenda Haines, the board chair of Oshkosh Food Co-op, their board chair. Hello, Brenda. Thanks for joining us today. Quick bit of housekeeping. Remember, if you can video do, especially for this one. This one's going to be pretty interactive. Now, I'm going to leave it up to you, Katie, and I can always jump in if you need a little assistance, but we're expecting over 40 people in the room. So what we're going to recommend is if folks have questions, comments, they want to speak, put that in the chat. So put your questions and comments there, and if you'd like to share them yourself, you can just say like to speak in the comments, and Katie and I will help weave that through as we keep going. But Katie does have specific questions she wants to get through with Brenda, so we'll work those in as we can. Remember, you can have as much conversation in the chat as you want. Often peers are sharing all sorts of information back and forth while paying attention to the presentation in the chat. Do mute if you're not speaking, so we don't have any sound issues. We don't usually have a problem with that one. And this call is being recorded, so keep that in mind that it will be recorded and open to the public. Anyone will be able to see it, so just keep that in mind when you decide to speak. We don't have time for full check-ins today, so you heard our list of co-ops who are here today. Looks like we've got a couple dozen, and if anyone has joined since we got started and I built my little list, go ahead and throw that in the chat. As always, we're going to ask people to stay focused on the topic du jour, which is really, we want to get as much juice as we can out of the information and knowledge from Oshkosh's experience. So sometimes there'll be broader questions about what to do about this or that, about owner equity campaigns or owner investment campaigns. We're going to encourage us to kind of really stick to Oshkosh's story, how it unfolded and what we can learn from it. I know you all would love to get just Katie's brain and just pick it in general about your upcoming campaigns. And you can always reach out to her or to us to do that. But we're going to try to stay focused on Oshkosh today. And of course, if you need more support, our email is on the slides. Our speakers today, as I said, Brenda Haines, board chair, Oshkosh Food Co-op, and Katie Novak, who's going to lead this session from Novak Cooperative Coaching. And I'm going to hand it over to Katie.
Great. Thank you guys for being here today. Excited to talk with you all. I'm always so honored to see so many faces and get to share with you guys today. So what we're going to do is some question and answer with the great Brenda Haines from Oshkosh Food Co-op. And as Jacqueline said, I will spend some time going through some prepared questions that I have for them, kind of to give you guys an overview of what's happening there and what's going on. And then hopefully we'll have some time to get your questions answered too, because that's most important for all of us. So Brenda, could we start by you kind of laying the groundwork for us? Tell us about your campaign, the number of owners you had when you started, where you are now, and all that good stuff.
Sure. So we launched a $1.6 million capital campaign in November, the first weekend in November. The day that we launched, I remember looking at the registration table and taking a picture with my mind because we had 1,038 member owners on a little sign. Katie had shared with us that when Green Top did their announcement, they got like 30 new members that day. We were prepped, but it was cold, snowing, and an outside announcement, so we did not have the same experience. Today, we are at 1,260 member owners.
Nice.
Our campaign was comprised of a goal to raise $800,000 in member owner loans and $800,000 in charitable gifts. which I understand is an unusual structure in the co-op world, but that was what worked in our pro forma.
Gotcha. Okay, and how many volunteers did you have involved in your capital campaign?
Sure. We had, I would say, between 35 and 40 volunteers. Our call team started with about 16 callers. We did have some folks who made it through the first phase of the campaign and then decided not to re-up. But we started with about 16 callers, 2 admin folks, 10 in-person volunteers who made one-on-one visits with owners, primarily owners who had been early owners and we knew would have extra questions about what we were doing, or owners with higher capacity.
Gotcha.
We had 3 closers and 3 to 5 folks who brought us food.
Yay! Those people are really important. Okay, so let's talk about timing a little bit. You said you started in November, and you mentioned a phase. So fill us in on timing and phases and where you are currently.
Sure. So the project as a whole is about a $2.6 million project. And so this represented 1.6 million of the project. We started planning in earnest in May of last year. So I would say our planning stage extended from May to November 1st, because lots of things were happening in concert or in parallel with one another.
Mm-hmm.
We were identifying our site, negotiating on our lease, planning our campaign, working to hit our owner goal of 1,000 before we announced our site. Like, all of those things were happening in parallel with one another. So planning took place from May to October. Our quiet phase, where we spoke with board and committee members about their participation in the campaign, took place between July and October. And we raised about $250,000 of our goal in that quiet phase through informal, we met one-on-one with all of those folks and asked for their commitments. Then our first official public phase took place between November and December 15th of last year. At the end of that phase, we were around 600,000, a little over 600,000. And we were, roughly, we had kind of set a goal of being at about 1/3 of the way through the campaign. And so we were where we thought we would be. We had a number of, because we have such a large pool of charitable donations that we were seeking, we had planned for some of those decisions to be made in the first quarter of the year from some of our foundation funders. So that happened. So we launched our second phase in late January and then continued through March 31st. And then we didn't quite hit our goal by March 31st. We were about $150,000 short at the end. And so we, that night, signed an extension for our site with our developers, and then began the push to close that final gap.
Gotcha.
And we'll have a final announcement on Sunday of where we've landed. Facebook Live. Please join us.
One of the things that folks are mentioning in the comments section, which I certainly have an opinion on, Brenda, is utilizing or using a capital campaign during the holidays. Tell us about how the holidays played out in your campaign.
Yeah, we made the decision that we would call through December 15th, and then we would take a break over the holidays, because one of the things that we've learned from this campaign is how difficult it is just to get a hold of people. And the holidays would certainly be no exception to that. In fact, probably complicating and making things even more difficult. So we took that 4-week break as really a way to regroup. We did a full kind of reset of our materials and went through and did an audit of all the funds that had come in, things like that. So we did a lot of administrative work over the break. I would not advise calling over the holidays. We even started just before Christmas, we even started to get people kind of saying to us, oh, this is too busy. I don't have time right now to think about this. It's not that it would have been difficult for us, but our owners had so much on their minds that we couldn't add something else to their to-do list for them to finish.
Gotcha. Gotcha. One other clarifying question I'd like to ask right now, Brenda, is about the structure of your donations and how you were able to take those. Was that through a fiscal agent, a 501c3? How did that play out?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. We worked with our community foundation to set up they have something called a special projects fund, and they've hosted these for a variety of community initiatives. Because our project is located in a USDA food desert, we are the project can be considered charitable because it has public benefit, and community foundations have a little bit of leeway in supporting for-profit organizations that are going to do work that has public benefit. So we couldn't fund the whole campaign through charitable contributions, but we were able to work with the Community Foundation and the Council on Foundations legal team to figure out the way to do this.
Gotcha. Gotcha. And just a quick side note there. Absolutely, I advocate for partnering with your local community foundations when you're making these kinds of decisions. The Cooperative Development Services also has a fund where they offer this type of service, and it's worth exploring further if you are interested in that, and I can get you contact information there. But certainly you guys had a great partner in Oshkosh there, and that worked out really well for you. How has the breakdown panned out in terms of donations versus loans?
Yeah, great question. So we had planned to be exactly 50-50, and we right now are at about 58 or 52-48%, a little heavier on the loans than on the donations, but really pretty close. But that did come with a little work. We talked with 3 board members who originally intended to do their participation as a loan, and they ended up changing it to be a charitable gift to have a little bit more balance between those pools.
Gotcha. That's a great point, and one that I thought we'd get to later, but let's talk about that a little bit more. Did that come up in conversation as you're on the phone with folks making your requests and asks? Did sometimes someone say, hey, I'd like to make a loan, but you really weren't, you were full in loans, so to speak, and you needed a donation? And how did those conversations go?
Great question. No, it only came up really at the very end, and we made the strategic decision that we would continue to accept loans, and then we would adjust the pro forma based on where we landed, because we've always viewed our pro forma as a living, breathing document, and this was just another piece of data that we were hypothesis testing, in effect, whether or not we could do this.
Yeah.
So we sat down truly 4 days ago, and with the pro forma, and looked at, okay, this is where we're at. What options do we have? And that option was one of the ones. We did brainstorm several others that sprang to mind, and we had the conversations, and the decisions were made within hours to make those shifts.
Which is one of the reasons why this is so cool and valuable that you guys are here with us today, Brenda, because this is happening right now for you. Yeah. You guys are living it and breathing it.
And I will tell you, the amazing thing to me was I didn't actually suggest to either of the board members who made this choice to do this. They both came to it on their own, simply explained the challenge that we were having, and one was on a call, and I think spouse overheard and passed a note and said, we should change our loan to a charitable gift. And which was just amazing. And the other was very similar, just immediately, well, we could do it, we can make that change as well. So I think it speaks to the importance of just being open and transparent about what it's going to take to do this. I mean, the other thing that I guess I should just tell you is we set our loan rates really low. I mean, we had aimed for a blended loan rate of 1%, which now in a post-COVID world actually seems like it would be a great investment.
Right.
That's me joking. I'm kidding. But we really worked hard to educate our owners on this is we're doing this, this is a community investment that we're making, and this is about risk sharing, and this is about investing in making our community stronger.
Yeah, absolutely. I tend to be more emotional these days. I'm emotional anyways, but that just touches my heart, those board members, making those decisions. And I think anyone who's raised money through a capital campaign, or any kind of campaign, really, these individual stories that stick with you for a long time just really make what we're doing even more impactful. But let's get to the heart, so to speak, Brenda, of why we're here today. Tell us where you were in your fundraising when the pandemic struck. Give us some stats, so to speak, on that, and then tell us what you started hearing and how you started adjusting based on what was happening in the world.
Mm-hmm. So when we were, right after Up and Coming, I think we all had coronavirus on our radar, even at Up and Coming.
Right.
And I sat next to Katie and I leaned over and I said, we have confirmation on a few larger donations and loans that are going to be coming through. At the time, we were right around 800,000, little over 800,000. So you can imagine we had a March 31st deadline and we were halfway to our goals. So people, I think, were really starting to ask questions like, can you get there? But we knew a lot of decision making was happening in the works.
Right.
So the second week in March, the third week in March, we had planned our annual meeting to take place, and we ended up postponing it because Wisconsin limited gatherings of more than 10 people. So we postponed. We used that time instead to announce that we had been awarded about $400,000 in loans and gifts from community organizations. So our community foundation did a $100,000 loan, and then two of their donors, Doug and Chris Hyde, and then an anonymous donor, matched that. And then a private foundation donated to the community foundation another $100,000 to support the project. And then a church did a $50,000 loan. And so we were announcing all of these on the day that was supposed to have been our annual meeting via Facebook Live instead. So we tried to substitute that in to keep things connected. But even then, being in the building together, we were asking people to color in. We have a carrot thermometer to show our progress, and even asking people to color in, we were passing them Lysol wipes between using the markers so that, we were showcasing good health behaviors. So that shifted our campaign really dramatically in our approach, because we had been gathering our callers together each night to make calls. And so we had to quickly turn and start managing the campaign team remotely.
Mm-hmm.
So that was one of probably the biggest shifts that happened. The other things I think that that took place, we had planned to announce the support of one of our healthcare systems, who also made a $50,000 charitable gift to support the project through their medical executive committee. We had planned to announce them, and they were suddenly unable to participate. Their attention was really focused elsewhere at the time, of course.
Right.
So lots of things, we had to be very fluid and adaptable to make that happen. We switched so that only Liz is our project manager, and I think she's also on the call. We were the only two who were still meeting in person to facilitate the call team. Everything else was happening remotely, which meant that instead of picking up a folder of papers to call, we were emailing out lists to people and things like that. So it did take some revamp in how we were going to do it all.
Yeah. You mentioned Liz, and one of the questions we have here is staff. Did you hire someone with the experience to run your campaign is the question, or did you run it yourself, Brenda? And what kind of support did you have?
Yeah. So Liz, our project manager, came on board in early February. We had previously hired a project manager who helped us get the campaign up and running, but did not stay with us. She left the first week into the campaign. So we did have a lot of very, very active board participation. We definitely count Katie on our team. She did some volunteer training and coaching with us, as well as helping us kind of pinch hit in through December after our original campaign manager left. And then we had a very experienced board member who had been part of capital campaigns before, who led the in-person team. And then I worked closely with the callers and led the call team.
Okay. So let's get back to the virus for a quick second here and talk about what did you hear? Did what you were hearing from owners on the other end of the phone change once the pandemic hit?
Great question. It did somewhat. Probably the biggest change was that people were actually at the other end of the phone.
Haha, that's
All of a
awesome.
sudden, we had spent several months talking to lots of voicemails, and now people were at home. And so we did notice an uptick in people who would pick up our calls or respond to our texts or our emails. And yes, some of the messages did change from people. We did start to run into people who were telling us really sad stories of, I lost my job this week, or I've been laid off, or my business is closed and I can't support the campaign. It made us very empathetic to what was happening in our community. We did create and publish a blog post about our small businesses that had shifted gears in ways that members could support them. So if they were doing curbside pickup, delivery, that kind of thing. But we also heard from owners who still had their jobs and their health, how grateful they feel for that. And it seemed to strike a note of resiliency in some and determination. A woman texted me earlier this week who added to her loan twice since the COVID-19 outbreak, and said people really need good news right now. And I think that that's true, that what we have heard is people want to believe in hope, and this feels like something local that they can still influence at a time when so many things feel outside their control. And I don't know if I would be saying exactly the same message if we were in a different spot. If we were at $200,000, I might be in a different spot. But mid-March, we had then grown from 800,000 to 1.2 million. And suddenly I think people thought this actually could happen.
Yeah,
this is doable. We can get to this finish line. And I think that emotional feeling of we want to make this happen, we're not going to let this go, influenced a lot of people to participate.
Gotcha.
And then
go ahead.
One other thing that we did is on the last week, we realized that we were now sort of within sight of the finish line. And the math started to work where if all of our owners contributed $100, we could get to the finish line. And so we started messaging that. Now, again, I would not recommend this at the start of a campaign because you would not get to your goal. But at the end of the campaign, we started this $100 challenge where we just said, hey, if you can, if all of our owners contributed $100, we could cross the finish line, we can secure our site. And I woke up the next morning after we sent that first email, and I'll tell you, I had tears in my eyes because there were about 25 emails already, and I was awake at probably 7 a.m. It had gone out at 5 from people saying, I'm in for $100, I'm in for 200, here's 500, here's 100. And it gave us this sense of momentum and a pathway. And the other thing I think that happened is we moved a lot of people from our no folder to our yes folder.
Uh-huh.
People who had said no to us suddenly felt that if I don't have super deep pockets, I can still participate. So we have 300 and we have about 615 participants in our campaign out of 1,260 owners. So
Amazing.
we're right about the 50% mark.
Yeah.
And about 340 of those are have given, I think, less than $250. So
Wow.
it definitely engaged a segment of our community who might not have been able to participate otherwise in a way that I think has been meaningful to them as well.
Yes. Yes.
It's been meaningful to us, and so I think it's
Right.
been meaningful to them as
Yeah.
well. I know one woman who came in towards the end of the campaign and contributed, I think, $125 or something like that, has since made 2 other contributions. And with her last one, she said, I'm just so grateful to have my health and my job. I feel like it's now my time to do more.
Wow.
And that, that was her way of participating. So
That's awesome. One quick side story, funny coincidence. I got a Facebook message today from a Green Top grocery owner who had made 4 loans to Green Top 4 different times, kind of like your individual there who upped her ante every time. And she sent me a Facebook message today to let me know that she was going to forgive her loans to Green Top. And this is a substantial amount of money we're talking here. And I just about cried. So this is these things are gonna keep happening to you and to all of us as we're raising capital for years to come. People will continually warm our hearts. But back to our questions, Brenda. You mentioned that you shifted to this $100 ask if everyone participated. Did you make any other messaging transitions or moves during the pandemic?
yeah, one that was pre-planned, sort of. I want to give a shout out to Fredericksburg because I sat in on their capital campaign session at Up and Coming, and they talked about how impressive, how well the challenge grant gifts that they had, challenges worked for them. Sorry, not challenge gifts, but challenges worked for them. So when we announced the $200,000 in funding from our community foundation on March 18th, we announced that as a challenge to our owners to match and raise $200,000. So that gave our callers something to talk about also right as the pandemic was hitting. And it was a really effective tool. So I want to thank Fredericksburg for sharing that insight with us. We leveraged that challenge, and we, by March 31st, had exceeded that additional $200,000, that match. And then we had an owner reach out to us right after the deadline and say, if I throw in $500, can you do another just mini challenge? So we called it a flash challenge. We did that one weekend. I think we raised $2,500 off that. And then an owner reached out to us and said, I really want you guys to be successful. If I put 5,000 in, do you think you could find some other owners who would maybe pitch in another $10,000 or $15,000, and we could offer another challenge? And so we worked on that, and we ended up with a $19,000 challenge, which was amazing because our gap was $38,000 to get to the finish line. So we led with that. So that was the other work that we did, was really amping up our challenge opportunities during the last part of the campaign and into the pandemic.
Gotcha. One question that we're seeing here in the chat, Brenda, is the structure of your loans and the payback terms. Can you give us a little info on that?
Yes. Our loans are a private offering, so this should not be considered a solicitation. Full disclosure.
Correct.
Our loans are 15-year loans. Payback begins in year 5. Interest accumulates over the term of the loan. 11 equal annual payments, and our interest rates are 1% to 3%. we did make the decision to allow people to choose a 0% interest rate if they're so inclined.
And does the 1 to 3% apply regardless of the amount of the loan?
No, it's graduated based on the size of the loan. So at our smallest loan amount is $2,000, and the amount for that is up to 1%.
Okay, great. Thank you. One more question from the chat, and then I'm going to go ahead and open it up to more questions now. We'll start utilizing the chat directly here. So as I'm asking this next question, folks, feel free to chime in and ask your questions, or say that you'd like to speak, and we'll entertain those. But in the meantime, Brenda, one thing you guys did very effectively was board participation in the campaign. Not only current board, but previous board. So talk to us about that and how that played out for you guys, and how, if you were able to leverage that in terms of the ability to raise more capital because of your success.
Mm-hmm. So we, our quiet phase of the campaign that took place last summer started with one-on-one sit-downs with each of our board members, talking with them about the campaign, the options, and how they'd like to participate. And then we extended out to past board members, and then we extended out to committee members. And we scheduled those over a 3-month period. And it was, there were just a couple of us who handled most of those meetings. But it was really, it gave us the chance to get our full story about the campaign into the hands of people who had been very involved in the project. So they had the information available to them at the time that we launched. At the same time, we had 100% participation. So every person that we asked to participate in the campaign did so.
At that point, right?
At that point,
right.
We asked all current, past board and committee folks. And at the same time we were doing that, we were also doing some informational meetings with community leaders and owners with higher capacity, and folks who we thought would be influencers in the decision-making process. So we met with some financial advisors in the community to just be sure that they had the information about what we were proposing to do at the ready. And that worked, and I think was extremely important. If I had to go back and do it again, I would do even more of that and do it sooner.
Yeah.
Because each one of those meetings paid dividends. It also led us to get a lot of invitations to come and speak at Rotary and Kiwanis and the Convention and Visitors Bureau and the Downtown Association. So there were a lot of good things that came out that helped build, I think, excitement about and support for the campaign.
Gotcha. Tell us about your minimum loan was it 2,000?
2,000, yes.
Yeah. Okay, that was one of our questions. And someone's asking about your tracking system. How are you keeping track of all this great info and all these donations and loans?
We use Nation Builder, so that is where we. But I will tell you, it is not an ideal solution for a capital campaign. So we've supplemented with, because of the reporting side of it, it's a little complex to get donation information out. It lives in tables that are not exportable. So we knew that based on our call team, that we had a number of folks who probably would not feel comfortable entering information directly into the database. So we used a paper system for tracking calls. We had a volunteer who then entered that information into Nation Builder. About midway through the campaign, it became unwieldy to just be using Nation Builder, so I have an Excel spreadsheet. So that's the tech stack.
Yeah. And that happens, as we're going through this process, we find some things are working, some things aren't working, and we have to make adjustments. Someone's asking about, Brenda, you mentioned because of these one-on-one sessions that you were having with owners and those interested in the campaign and the project ahead of time, that you got invitations to other things, to speak at the Rotary, for example. And the question is in relation to the capital campaign. My guess is that those invitations were to talk about the co-op in general. You weren't soliciting loans and donations necessarily from the Rotary Club, so to speak, since that's not how we operate in terms of the capital campaign.
Right. Well, again, ours is a little bit different because we do have the
The
charitable
donation.
component. So
Yes.
we could talk about, we could say, we have an owner loan component, which I can tell you about if you become an owner, and here's
Right.
your brochure to do that.
Yes.
But we do have this charitable side as well. And if you're so inclined, you can make a donation to our fund at the Community Foundation.
Yeah.
I would not say that was a hugely effect of like, we didn't go into those expecting to raise a ton of dollars. That was more about awareness and
Yeah.
membership building and
Yeah.
building community support for the concept.
On that topic, Brenda, how many people made donations that were not owners, or do you have data on that yet?
Yeah, I think there were somewhere between 30 and 50,
Okay.
but they interestingly ranged from $25 to 10,000.
Wow. Interesting.
Yeah, so it it's and it, it is definitely something where we often are processing gifts that have come either in the mail or through our charitable fund, and finding, here's $500, here's 1,000 from someone that we don't know, is not a member,
Yeah.
um, but maybe connected to a member.
Ah,
So we've learned like, oh, that's my sister. I haven't been able to get her to join, but she made a donation. Cool.
that's awesome.
Mhm.
Let's see here. Tracking headquarters. You mentioned a space where people were coming together. Did you have that space ahead of time, or how did that evolve? And do you think now that you've been through, pre-COVID and post, how does that play out? What would you recommend?
Yeah. Um, we loved bringing the callers together. We were able to use my office, which was very convenient. And we loved being able to bring the callers together because we could kick off each night of calling with a little update meeting
Yes.
and give the latest messaging. A little ways into the campaign, started preparing kind of a daily overview sheet that we would give to folks that said, here's how many members we have, here's where we are in the campaign, here's what our average gift is, and then here's some language that you can use as you're leaving voicemails and text messages and emails, and we'd update that because sometimes we were calling people. I mean, this is the other thing we did not know going in. We would call people 10 times. I mean, that is not uncommon to reach out that many times. So you kind of need some fresh material after a while. So
Yeah.
that's what prompted us to start developing those. So we would shift the messaging kind of on a weekly or biweekly basis to, all right, now let's talk about how close we are. Let's talk about how many days we have left. Let's talk about the challenge, those kind of messaging shifts. And we always wanted people to have at their fingertips as they were making calls, the latest information about where we were and the number of members and things like that.
Okay. Mary is asking about owner growth during the campaign. Tell us about that.
Yeah. When we started the campaign, the day we launched, we had 1,038 owners. Today we have 1,260.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I will tell you that two of our biggest ownership growth days, one was the deadline for our capital campaign, March 31st. I think we got 20 new members that day, 25 new members that day. And then again, on our last challenge weekend, last weekend, I think we got another 20-ish members. So I think people who've maybe been sitting on the sidelines and have been watching the progress are seeing it and saying, okay, this is the time.
Gotcha. What about the Community Foundation? Let's see, Sue is asking about their fees. How does
Yeah.
that work?
We're really lucky in that our Community Foundation for Special Projects funds has just a flat fee that they charge on a monthly basis. So we did not pay like a 1% fee or anything like that. Was based on the amount of the donations. It's based on a flat fee, which is very generous. They do it as part of their support of the community to be able to facilitate projects like this. I just was thanking them again yesterday, and it included that we did not pay, I don't believe, credit card fees for processing donations as well. So it was a huge savings for us compared against what the other ways that we might have accomplished the same thing.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's remarkable. Tell us about the timeline and how far out your build out is, and the project moving forward.
Sure. So we are the developers that we're working with are continuing to move forward. I mean, when that was the other line of communication that has emerged as COVID broke, was really like, is this going to put the project on hold? Are you going to be able to work? They have planned a late May groundbreaking. I think that might now be shifting to early June. In large part, I think because we've held things up a little bit, but they've been extremely collaborative and willing to work with us. And we've just had very open and honest conversations about where we're at and what the challenges are.
Let's talk about that a little bit, Brenda. This isn't a question from the chat necessarily, but tell us about that. Getting to the end of the campaign, having a bit of a ways to go, and the conversation with the developer and that negotiation process. What was that like?
Yeah. We reached out, I would say we reached out probably in late February to them to say, there's a lot of work going on. There's a lot that's in the pipeline, but we want to, we were having constant communication about the layout and the design that was happening. And so in one of the meetings, we began to talk about do we have any flexibility? I just need to know because we're coming in on the final month of this. And they said, what are you thinking? Like, what would you need? And I just threw out an extra 6 weeks, hoping that, that would give us sufficient time. And they said, let us know as you get closer. We think we could make something happen there without throwing off the whole timeline too much. So we kind of kept that in our back pocket. And then as COVID broke, began really pursuing in earnest. I think one of the things that changed the most from COVID for us was we had about 5 other corporate meetings scheduled, and just one after the other, they started canceling or postponing with no future date. Yeah. And so that really was, with those in mind, we had been very optimistic about hitting the goal by March 31st. But as those began canceling, we started to realize that we may need the extension. So we started talking in earnest with the developers about getting that extension and making it happen.
Gotcha. Kelly is asking the 2 biggest lessons that you've learned through this process.
I think that one is the more you invest upfront in educating and preparing your owners for the campaign, the more success will come quickly. I think every meeting that we had was a valuable meeting. And like I said, I would do more of that. If I could go back and do it again, I would do more of that. And then I think the other is just having a game plan for reaching people so many times. We really underestimated. I mean, we thought we might reach people 2 or 3 times and we would get a response. And what we found is that we were calling, emailing, texting, sometimes, like I said, up to 10 times. And we had a couple folks on our team who are in direct sales, and they said that that's now what their companies are also advising them to plan for that many contacts. So it just multiplies the scope. When we did our planning, we built our assumptions on, okay, each owner, 3 contacts, X many contacts per week. This is how long it'll take. And, we seriously underestimated that. So
Gotcha.
The other thing that we did that was helpful to us, we didn't do a full feasibility study for our campaign. That was a question that we got a number of times. We did model our database. We used a data tool to evaluate the capacity within our ownership base and sort of get a prediction that would help us understand, is what we're going after feasible?
Gotcha. Kim is asking a question about strategic plan and messaging. Did you create a strategic plan or a case statement to draw messaging from, and how different was this message from your owner engagement messaging?
Great question. We made a one pager and we made a pitch deck. So we didn't do the traditional kind of full on case statement. We had a double-sided one pager, kind of the overview. And then we used a slide deck a lot to tell the story. And because the story was unfolding, I mean, we signed the lease just days before we announced the campaign. So because the story was unfolding as it was being built, building that pitch was really, it felt a little like building the plane while we were flying it, to be 100% honest.
Yeah, yeah. And someone's asking about the messages, the number of contacts that you're having with folks. The question is, were you leaving messages 10 times, or was there back and forth, or can you shed a little more information on the volume of contacts?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if they did not respond, we were leaving messages or texts or emails or all three. And just every time it was a little different update. So, hey, I'm calling again from the food co-op and here's where we're at right now. We did a lot of that.
Yeah, persistence does pay off, I guess.
Yeah, that was the strategy, really, was to let people know that we really wanted and needed them. And it was interesting because I think in the beginning we interpreted that as people didn't want to participate or didn't want to call, didn't want to talk to us. And what we ended up hearing near the end of the campaign in the final month was, oh, I just haven't gotten to that yet. We'd run into someone at the grocery store. I feel so bad I haven't returned your phone call yet. It was very much like they wanted to talk about it.
Yeah.
They just weren't quite ready. Yes, and it was really about us waiting for them to be ready. And when they were ready, then we could go.
Yeah. Did anyone tell you to stop calling them?
When we first called, we called until 9 p.m. We changed that to 8 p.m. because we did interrupt a few folks putting their kids to bed.
Yeah.
They didn't say stop calling me because I don't like the co-op. They said, you can't call me this late because I have kiddos.
I'm trying to put my kids to bed.
Yeah. No, I don't think we had anybody who said stop calling. I don't think anybody at all felt that way, that I recall.
Okay. Back to the data modeling, where people are asking for a little more detail on that.
Yeah. There's a subscription service that will provide that service. So based on your owner base, looking at it's just predictive modeling, basically, based on your owner base and community.
Yeah.
And I can share the name of the company if that's helpful.
Was that fee related, Brenda?
Yes, it was. There was a subscription fee to use the tool.
Gotcha.
Can I get that from you, Brenda, and send that out in the follow-up email?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks. Yeah, there's some other questions about sharing resources. The one-page update that you were giving to callers, people are asking for that, and your pitch deck as well, if you'd be willing to share those things.
Yep, I'll make a note.
Let's see, there was another question I was wanting to get to. Oh, so your project cost is 2.6 million. Someone is asking, you raised 1.6. Where's the funding coming from for the gap there?
Yeah, great question. We have budgeted for about $270,000 in member equity. So those are our ownership shares. We negotiated a tenant incentive, and then we have planned some other vendor incentives. That totals about $420,000.
Okay.
So our developers were very engaged in making us successful, helping us become successful. And then we have a budget item for grants. We're currently working, as I'm sure many of you are, on a number of different grants. I think 6 total. The total funding pool between those is about $445,000. And then we have recently, we had more funds in that grant bucket, but because of what's happened with COVID and not pursuing or some of the response that we think will be focused locally on COVID response versus projects like ours. We have recently approached our Economic Development Corporation and we'll be pitching them for a community loan.
Gotcha. Someone's asking what the vendor incentives are. Could you elaborate on that a bit?
What the tenant incentive is?
You had mentioned tenant
Oh.
incentives and vendor incentives.
Right. The in the planning process, in the work that our team did with Colluminate, we've been advised that there may be some incentives that people are willing to pay to put product on shelves in the first years or free fill, and that's planned for, I guess, in the budget. So.
Gotcha. Yes, thank you for clarifying that. That brought up another question I remember I saw earlier, I don't think I asked, was professional assistance you were getting in terms of your pro forma.
Yeah, we worked with Colluminate, originally the late Bill Gessner, who helped us build the original, and then Don Moffitt did a review of it for us once we had selected our site and before we signed our lease. So we had your help.
Another question I'm seeing that I didn't get to previously was when we were talking about 100% participation, Brenda, with your board, can you define the participation? Was that a loan or a donation? Did it matter? Was there a minimum there?
No, we didn't set we have folks of very different capacities within the board, current board, past board, committees. So I think our probably smallest contribution was, I think $25, and our highest was probably in the neighborhood of 100,000.
Okay. One thing that that I learned when working with you guys that I think is pretty cool and remarkable is that the founder, the individual with the idea to start the co-op in Oshkosh, tell us that story.
Oh, sure. So our history is owed, or our formation is owed to a college student, Bridget Weber, who was in the sustainability program at the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh, and was talking with a professor, and they started talking about food co-ops. And I think she said, or he said, why isn't there a food co-op here in Oshkosh? And the response was, well, maybe we should do something about that. And so she took the initiative to organize a group of community volunteers to get together and look at, could this be something that we do? So we, one of the delightful things that came about during the campaign was that some students who are on the student government, within UW Oshkosh reached out because they're very excited about our location is near the university, and they are sponsoring a golf outing that's now been postponed to fall, but to benefit the co-op. So just some cool connections and involvement.
That's pretty amazing. We do have some more questions coming in through the chat, but we are nearing one more question, Jacqueline. Okay, we'll take one more, and then we'll turn it back over to Jacqueline. Kelly's asking about, do you get questions, and how do you answer questions about who's participating? So an owner wants to know who's on the list, who's participating, or maybe not an owner, maybe someone from the media. And how did you handle using people's names or not using people's names in that regard?
Yeah, we have not. We on our pledge sheets, we gave people the option to remain anonymous when they were sending it back. We also we didn't though publish names unless we did this thing on social where we had everybody hold up a sign with their why they're supporting the campaign, either through a loan or a donation. And we always asked people, if they would be willing to do that. We had a few who wanted to remain anonymous, so they were willing to give us their why, and then we just took a picture of the sign and posted it. We found that those are some of our most popular content over the course of the campaign.
Yeah.
And that it gave support. It kind of built a visual of all of the different folks and from different walks of life within our community who had gotten behind the project.
Gotcha.
That became more impossible post-COVID. I mean, we did coordinate a few remotely, but it was very difficult to continue to do that.
It's a different world now, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, Jacqueline, I'll turn it back over to you. We do have a couple more questions, and maybe we can, Brenda, when we see the chat, perhaps you can respond to those, or I can respond for you if you'd like, whatever, we can work that out. But thank you so much for sharing your story. Thanks for making time when I know this is certainly a very busy time for you.
Yeah, my pleasure. I've learned so much from everyone else. Happy to be able to share some of what we've learned too.
Thank you guys both so much. Thank you to Katie, fabulous job facilitating today, and of course having had an inside seat, knowing exactly what to ask. So that was terrific. Thank you so much to Brenda. This has been a terrific session. I know people have been looking forward to it for a long time, and I will be tuning in Sunday because I'm an owner of Oshkosh Food Co-op, and I cannot wait to hear the excitement. I have a funny feeling I know what it is, but I can't wait to be there. Just want to let you all know real quick, today's recording inside will be available from a Google folder. I'm going to be sending that to you, and guess what? We finally, because we're like in the Stone Ages, figured out YouTube, and we're going to be putting up these videos on YouTube. Yay! That'll be happening this week. Just wanted you to know, upcoming Tuesday, don't miss Collective Hope with Amma Hasalafi from Gen City Market, talking about the intersection between community organizing and cooperative food co-ops and how we can bring those things together now that people are more open to doing things that benefit their whole community than ever. We'll also have Creating Community Response from Mickey Smith at Little Africa Food Co-op, Little Africa Food Cooperative. They're looking very specifically at how they pulled together community leaders through the co-op to come up with a response to COVID-19. And they did this really early. They actually had it in place, like they had started it before they came to up and coming. They were on the ball. And it's an amazing document they came up with at the end. So come check out how they did that. And I was running late, so the third one didn't get on here, but Friday, we're going to have the team that started the Renaissance Food Co-op from Fund for Democratic Communities here. And they're going to also be talking, so a week very focused on the organizing, community organizing, because half of starting a food co-op is community organizing and half of it's business development. And they're going to talk about how community organizing actually now can feed actually better development of your food co-op in the long term. So it's going to be a really fun week. I hope you all join us, and you know where to find us. Thanks again to Katie and Brenda for such a great job, and have a great weekend, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, guys.